Well, if you go all the way back, I have loved the arts from the beginning, perhaps for different reasons. Both of my parents emigrated from China. They met each other in Chicago, and it was during the time of the China Civil War in the 1949-1950 era, and they realized they could not go back to their home country. In particular, my mother was a teenager when her father helped her escape by herself, and so she rode a train out of her hometown. It took 8 days to get out, and she bypassed about 141 interrogations, but made it out, and ultimately ended up getting a student visa to go to college, and met my dad, who was already in the United States, and that they married. And so he became a college professor in Oklahoma, where I was born, and we moved to Arkansas. And when I was 9, he died of cancer. And so it was just my mom and me. And I did not have at that time enough words, regular conversational words. Can you hear that? I'm sorry. I'm going to start that because the sirens are going by. Okay. I did not, at the time, when my father died, I did not have enough words, regular conversational words, to express my grief over the loss of my dad, because maybe most 9-year-olds don't, but I certainly did not, having been raised in this mung bean noodle, corn dog, fried chicken, bok choy type of setting, and I really didn't think anything about it until my father died. And then I realized that those art lessons that I was taking and those music lessons that I was taking for fun allowed me to express something far deeper than I could in just linear everyday conversation. And so the arts became a vocabulary set for me, because I could express my heart as well as other things I wanted to say. And so I dove into the arts in any way I could, sang in choirs and played in the band, and even majored in music in college, and draw constantly. And so that helped open the doors to not only understanding what the arts can do, but it also helped me advance what I wanted to learn. Majored in college, majored in the arts, and so now I see across the nation so many different people who are smart, but people don't realize it, or who don't come to their full fruition until they realize that the arts can be there for them too. Not especially kids, but not just kids. There's so many different forms of expression that help people know how to belong, and that they can belong. And so my profession has involved things like being an elementary music teacher, and various forms of participation in the arts, as well as in fundraising and fund giving on multiple sides. So it was that spurred me on to say, I would like to see the nation and how many ways they get involved in the arts. And so throwing my name in the hat to join the National Endowment for the Arts as the chair was my next step. Well, it was in the 1960s, and initially, while President Kennedy was alive, there was already a conversation and talk about having that type of fund that would support the cultural celebrations of the United States through the arts and the humanities. And then Lyndon Johnson, after he became the president, really signed into legislation the establishment of the National Foundation on the Arts and the Humanities, which grew into the National Endowment for the Arts and its sibling agency, the National Endowment for the Humanities. So that was in 1965. And ever since then, it has been about finding ways to do what we talked about before. Can we celebrate the arts in so many different ways across the nation and make sure that people have that ability to be in the arts or participate in the arts or see the arts in so many different ways? What I do think, as we've looked over the course of the arts in multiple ways, is that we still don't have an understanding of how much the arts permeates our lives in multiple aspects. And there is I'm jumping around, but there is still a sense that the arts are only about buying tickets to a production. And there's nothing wrong with getting tickets to a production or seeing performances. They're wonderful. But once you see how many ways from being a culture bearer, from being a way to bring economic vitality and community vitality within a city, a community, and even rural areas, then we start seeing the vast array of ways that the arts permeate our lives and can celebrate and make us feel like we belong. So that's what's happened. So that is what's happened over the last 60 years for sure. Well, I have always loved this position and the National Endowment for the Arts and what it does. And so I walked in with total celebration and a curiosity. So I was not walking in with judgment. I was walking, or criticism. I was walking in instead with, let's find more ways to make sure that people have access to the arts. Let's look at what's going on now and celebrate that. And is there more that we can have to leverage how the arts make an impact in communities beyond what we already have? And of course, it always requires more money, but at the same time, what do we currently have to leverage, where instead of saying this one project leverages this group over here, is there a way we can say 1 + 1 = 5? How do you have this one project leverage more impact across maybe the community or people? So that is how I was thinking when I came to the National Endowment for the Arts. I did have to learn how to, I felt like drinking from a fire hose at the beginning, but those were more about what government guidelines and rules and processes did I, as the chair, need to follow. And I had the ability to celebrate the wonderful staff and also the partners out in every state with the state arts councils and the local arts councils, because together we're it's a federated partnership where it is both federal government as well as the states and the local communities. That's a partnership woven together, and I think it's great. We set out to achieve what we discussed earlier. Were we reaching all the communities? Were we reaching all the were we reaching all the congressional districts? Were we reaching areas who did not know how to apply? And if so, were we doing enough grant writing workshops on how to apply? I found almost immediately that the staff at the National Endowment for the Arts were so dedicated to connecting people and answering any questions. So it did seem like people, before they applied, could contact anyone on the staff and they would be willing to talk with them. And those things that seemed like a small process actually are a really big process when it comes to your dedication to making the arts accessible. Is, can you talk to the staff? Can they tell you how the processes work and what else do we need to know? And so that part was working well and could expand even more. In terms of, I got to celebrate by going to every state. So I went to 50 states during my term and a few other countries as well. So really understand where the partners are. And we used to adapt a mantra by saying, when you've seen one community, you've only seen one community. Because trying to make, you wouldn't want to try to make Tennessee the same as Virginia or Utah the same as Maine. And instead, what you could do is celebrate that each state and each community had its own way of celebrating the arts and participating in the arts in their own way. So we did encourage more research on who's doing what. For example, now you can look on the NEA and find the map of ways people ways people participate in the arts across the nation. Did you know that one of the leading places, maybe the highest leading place in jewelry making, started out in Rhode Island? There's so many. Who reads more? Who watches media more? And so those kind of things we were able to deepen the research on. One of the things, in addition to that and celebrating what's going on in every state, that I was really proud of, just seems like it was an internal aspect of the National Endowment for the Arts, in that we were ranked the #1 place to work in the federal government for the small agencies category. And the reason that meant so much to me is because here we have this wonderful organization and the dedicated staff who were really committed beyond the job description to say, I'm going to help make this accessible and explain what's going on in terms of how you apply and answer any questions you may have. And so do you have, in any place people work, employers who are working because they feel like they have to be there? Or do you have employers who want to be there, employees who want to be there? And there's a big difference, because when we have employees who want to be there, we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. We're all trying to figure out issues or potential problems early on. And you can see everybody's dedicated from different perspectives. So to be able to be named the best place to work in the federal government, at least for the small agency category, that was very special. Well, everything from economic aspects and what leverages vitality in a community to how the arts programs help the military. And so I had at least 100 members. I had at least 100 meetings with members of Congress, separate. Sometimes I would go to their office. Sometimes I would meet them in their communities, and we would have town hall meetings together for their community. And so those meetings started almost from when I began as chair, developing the relationship and coming in and saying, what questions do you have for me? And we stand ready to provide you any information you need, and really establishing our commitment to helping them understand so they can support and explain to their constituents. So that's how the process worked. So anytime there was some kind of challenge, I would say the majority of the people knew who we were already, because we had started those relationships and they had hopefully sensed our authenticity. Well, I go back to what we talked about earlier, and that is this is such a wonderful industry, sector, area in so many different ways for people to feel like they belong. So having the arts present in different projects, different ways, and this realization, for example, I'm going to use one example that can be transcended to other areas. When we visited a school in a very low socioeconomic neighborhood in California, there was an arts program for kids in that school, and as a result, this is what the board told us, as a result, the school board noticed that truancy rates plummeted. Kids were excited about coming to school. Those children who had been labeled as not very intelligent, they found out were absolutely intelligent, but they learned through the process of the arts, even related to math, science, and other non-arts subjects. That's very gratifying to know that somebody you can bypass that and realize that they're smart all along. And so those kind of findings across the nation need to be conveyed, and then also just dispelling this idea that the arts are only one way, or they're only in one corner, when there's so many different ways there. It's almost just it's just spread all over the place. Sometimes I look at arts in a similar system as restaurants. Of course, I live in New York, and there's only 26,413 restaurants. But you have restaurants as an analogy. You have restaurants which are Michelin starred, absolutely fantastic, delicious, and also expensive compared to, say, a mom and pop shop or somebody saying, I just love making cinnamon rolls, so I'm going to open my own place and have other foods as well. So you have restaurants that are all sizes and shapes, and together they create a sector where people can feel like they can try out things, or they have their favorite and they may not want to go to that restaurant, but I love this one over here. And that's the way the arts are. They're everywhere, and they are in so many different ways. And finding a way to explain that the arts are there for us and not just one way to look at the arts, that would be the key thing to having people really understand the importance of the arts. Because for me, it's a vocabulary. We invest public dollars in the arts because it is the most strategic and fair way to provide access for all to participate in the arts. I'm going to add one more thing, and then you can figure out whether you want to use this or not. Sometimes there is an argument about the arts can go only to private dollars, and while we are immensely appreciative of private dollars as well as public dollars, this is reminding me of what you just asked. There are philanthropic dollars that fund in multiple aspects, but not all do. Some fund specific things that foundation or that funder wants to fund, but doesn't fund everything else, or maybe fund a specific audience but doesn't fund all the audiences that could participate in the arts. And that's fair to the philanthropic funders, but having that access to public funds better ensures that those who apply, that more can apply and that more can have access to those funds, as opposed to excluding in certain ways. Well, I want to say happy birthday to the National Endowment for the Arts. Happy 60th birthday. This is something we can really celebrate because this organization is so dedicated to ensuring that the arts are available and present in so many different ways, not just one way at the expense of another, but so many multiple ways, which gives an opportunity for more people to participate, more people to find themselves more people to find a way for them to feel like they belong. Not just that wonderful project at the Kauffman Center, but I've had some other previous funding opportunities from Community Foundation and others where we were funding the arts. So combining public, private, corporate, individual donors, and understanding that each comes from a different perspective, not all the time, but often they do, in any project, it's really a win-win for everybody. But there is something where the public dollars can create a framework for others to participate, whether they're in government or they're in private sectors. That's what I found the most is there's just the celebration that one leverage point of public dollars can help connect to others who are interested in certain aspects of the arts. That goes back to what we talked about earlier. There still is no arts funder, private, who funds all aspects of at least 20 disciplines, as well as every state and every congressional district. So there are national arts funders, thank goodness for them, which are private, but they don't fund everything. And so having access in so many different recognized, formally recognized forms of art is still the National Endowment for the Arts. So there are more, thank goodness there are more philanthropic funders, but in partnership with them, we then start saying, yes, we are a national fund, because most other private funders have specific requirements of their own, and they don't say we'll fund all 20 disciplines in every congressional district. It's still the National Endowment for the Arts. Even if there are more funders that are not government funders or public funders, it's still the National Endowment for the Arts that funds across the nation, every congressional district, across the states, each in their own way, thanks to our partners too, the state arts councils and the local arts councils. I can't think of anything. I'm just so glad that somebody's celebrating the 60th anniversary. I was there to celebrate the 50th anniversary, and I know how exciting that is. So yeah, every 10 years we need to remind ourselves in between how great this organization is and how it punches far more above its weight because of what it can do and how it can reach in so many different communities.